She grabbed a 17-year-old girl by the arm, dragged her out of the seat her father paid $6,000 for, and zip-tied her wrists behind a metal chair until the girl stopped breathing. Gloria Henson didn't care that Maya Richardson had a ticket. She didn't care that Maya had asthma. She didn't care that Maya was begging for her inhaler. She looked at a black teenager in a hoodie sitting in first class and decided that girl didn't belong there. What Gloria didn't know was that the man waiting at the airport to pick up his daughter wasn't just a worried father. He was the kind of man who could buy the entire airline before breakfast and fire every single person on that plane before lunch. This is the story of the flight that destroyed an empire. Before we begin, if you're new here, subscribe to this channel and hit that bell so you never miss a story where karma hits back hard. Watch this one all the way to the end, because I promise you, the ending will give you chills. And drop a comment right now. Tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see just how far this story travels. Now, let's go back to where it all started. Maya Richardson had a routine for flying. She'd put on her noise-canceling headphones, open her drawing app, and disappear into the music until the wheels touched the ground. It was the only way she could survive being locked inside a metal tube at 30,000 feet. She hated flying. She'd hated it since she was 9 years old, when a turbulence episode over the Atlantic had triggered her first full panic attack. Her father, Derek, had been beside her that time. He'd held her hand and talked her through it, counting backwards from 100 in that deep, steady voice of his until her breathing slowed. But tonight, Derek wasn't beside her. Tonight, Maya was alone in seat 1A on flight PA 2207, the red-eye from London Heathrow to JFK, and she was doing it for him. His 50th birthday was in 2 days. He thought she was still in London finishing her summer music program. He had no idea she'd moved her flight up a week to surprise him. She was sketching his portrait on her iPad, a digital charcoal drawing of him wearing a silly birthday hat, smiling that wide, easy smile he saved only for her and her mother. In the corner, she'd written in careful, looping script, "Happy 50th, Dad. Thanks for being my wings." Maya bounced her knee. She always bounced her knee when she was anxious. The first-class cabin was quiet. Most passengers were already asleep under their blankets. The man in 1B, a heavy-set guy in an expensive suit, was on his second scotch and hadn't said a word to her since boarding. That was fine. Maya didn't need conversation. She needed to land. She didn't notice Gloria Henson watching her. Gloria had been flying this route for 22 years. She was the chief purser on PA 2207, the most senior cabin crew member, and she ran her section of the aircraft like it was her personal living room. She knew every type of passenger, the quiet executives who wanted nothing but sleep and a good wine, the old money families who never made eye contact with the crew, the nervous first-timers who asked too many questions. She had a category for everyone. And when her eyes landed on seat 1A, Gloria put Maya Richardson into a category instantly. Wrong seat. It wasn't the headphones. It wasn't the iPad. It was the oversized hoodie, the loose cargo pants, the beat-up sneakers. It was the braids. It was the brown skin. Gloria would never say that out loud, not even to herself. But the thought formed hard and fast, like a stone dropping into still water. That girl does not belong here. Gloria straightened her silk scarf, smoothed her skirt, and walked down the aisle. She stopped at row 1 and tapped Maya's shoulder. Not gently, a firm, deliberate tap, the kind you'd use to get the attention of someone you'd already decided was beneath you. Maya jumped. She pulled her headphones off, eyes wide. "Oh, sorry, I didn't see you there." "Ticket," Gloria said. She extended her hand, palm up. Her face was flat. No smile, no warmth. Maya blinked. "I showed my boarding pass at the gate, and when I boarded, and I'm asking to see it again. Is something wrong?" "There's a discrepancy in the manifest," Gloria said. Her voice rose just enough to make the man in 1B glance over. "This seat is reserved for a full-fare Diamond Medallion member." "That's me," Maya said. She was already reaching for her backpack, her hands moving quickly, because something about this woman's energy was making her stomach turn. "Well, it's under my dad's account, but it's my ticket, Maya Richardson." "Your dad's account," Gloria repeated. She looked Maya up and down, slowly, deliberately. The kind of look that strips a person down and decides their worth in under 3 seconds. A smirk pulled at the corner of Gloria's mouth. "Let me guess. Points? Or maybe a staff travel companion pass?" "No," Maya said. Her hands were shaking now. She unlocked her phone and pulled up the digital boarding pass. "It's a paid ticket. Full fare. Derek Richardson. I'm his daughter." Gloria took the phone from Maya's hand. She didn't ask for it. She took it. She stared at the screen. The name matched. The seat matched. The booking reference checked out. But Gloria's mind had already reached its verdict, and no amount of evidence was going to overturn it. She saw a teenager in a hoodie with a phone that probably wasn't hers, showing a pass that was probably fake, sitting in a seat she probably scammed her way into. "The system shows this seat is occupied by a VIP," Gloria lied. The system showed exactly what Maya said it showed. But Gloria had been doing this long enough to know that if she said it with enough authority, no one questioned it. "You need to gather your things. I'm relocating you to economy comfort until we can verify the payment." Maya's face changed. The nervousness turned into something else. Disbelief. "What? No, I paid for this seat. I have anxiety. I need the space. You can't just move me." "I can, and I will," Gloria snapped. "We have a standby list a mile long and actual paying customers who deserve this environment." "I am a paying customer," Maya said. Her voice cracked. She hated the way it cracked. She hated that her eyes were filling up. She hated that she could feel every passenger in the first 3 rows turning to look at her. "You're being aggressive," Gloria said. She said it loudly enough for it to function as an announcement. She was building a case in real time, establishing a narrative that would justify whatever she did next. The man in 1B sighed. He swirled his scotch and didn't even look up. "Just move the kid, Gloria. She's ruining my drink." Maya looked at him. She looked at Gloria. She looked around the cabin for a single sympathetic face and found nothing but averted eyes and closed curtains. "This is crazy," she said. "Call the pilot. Call the ground crew. Call my dad." Gloria leaned in close. Her voice dropped to a whisper, so sharp it could cut glass. "I don't care who your daddy is. Grab your bag right now, or I call the air marshal." Maya froze. The words landed like a slap. She knew what that meant. She knew the stories. She knew what happened when girls who looked like her argued with authority figures in small, enclosed spaces. She knew that once the word marshal entered the conversation, she was no longer a passenger. She was a suspect. "Fine," Maya whispered. A tear slipped down her cheek. "I'll move, but you're making a mistake." "The only mistake," Gloria said, straightening to her full height, "was letting you board this cabin." Maya stood up. She grabbed her iPad and her backpack. Her hands were trembling so badly she almost dropped the tablet. As she stepped into the aisle, the turbulence warning chimed and the cabin lights flickered. But the real turbulence wasn't outside the aircraft. Gloria didn't just want Maya out of first class. She had decided, somewhere in the dark corridors of her own prejudice, that this girl was a problem. And Gloria Henson solved problems. She marched Maya past the business class pods, past sleeping passengers wrapped in duvets who didn't stir, through the curtain and into the rear galley. The narrow space between the lavatories and the beverage carts, the part of the plane that passengers never see. "Wait here," Gloria ordered. "Where am I sitting?" Maya asked. She was hugging her iPad to her chest like a shield. Her breathing was getting shallow. She could feel the walls of the aircraft pressing in on her. The claustrophobia was rising like water filling a room. "Economy's full," Gloria said. "You're going to sit on the jump seat." "That's for crew," Maya said. "This isn't right. I have a first-class ticket. You can't just put me back here." "Stop lying," Gloria shouted. The shout was sudden and sharp, and it echoed in the small galley. It was calculated. Gloria knew that raising her voice would make the girl flinch, and flinching could be reinterpreted as hostility. Kyle Pruitt, the junior flight attendant, stepped into the galley. He was 24, 6 months on the job, and he looked nervous. "Gloria, everything okay? The passengers in 4D are asking about the noise." "We've got a stowaway," Gloria said, gesturing at Maya like she was pointing at a piece of luggage that had fallen into the aisle. "Found her in 1A. She's combative." Kyle looked at Maya. He saw a teenager who was crying. A kid, not a combatant. "She looks scared, Gloria," Kyle said carefully. "Did you check her boarding pass scan?" "I checked enough," Gloria snapped. "She's refusing to comply. Kyle, get me the restraints." The word hit the air like a gunshot. Maya's eyes went wide. "Restraints? You mean handcuffs?" No, please don't do that." "She's escalating," Gloria said to Kyle. Her voice was calm now, clinical, even though her eyes were wild. "She's a threat to flight safety. Protocol 7C. Restrain the passenger." Kyle hesitated. He looked at Maya. He looked at Gloria. Every instinct in his body told him this was wrong. A 17-year-old girl crying in a galley was not a threat to flight safety. But Gloria was his supervisor. Gloria controlled his evaluations. Gloria had the power to end his career with a single write-up. "Gloria, I don't think—" "Do it," Gloria cut him off, her voice dropping to ice. "Or I write you up for insubordination and you never fly international again. Your choice, Kyle. Right now." Kyle crumbled. He hated himself for it, but he crumbled. He opened the emergency locker and pulled out the heavy-duty zip-tie cuffs. Maya backed up against the metal food carts. Her breathing was coming in short, ragged gasps. "Please, I have asthma. I have a panic disorder. If you tie me up, I will not be able to breathe. Please, just let me call my dad. His name is Derek Richardson. Just Google him. That's all I'm asking. Just Google his name." "Give me your wrists," Gloria said. She stepped forward and grabbed Maya's arm. Her grip was iron. Maya pulled back. It wasn't a swing. It wasn't an attack. It was the instinctive recoil of a scared child pulling away from someone who was hurting her. "Don't touch me." "Assault," Gloria yelled. "She grabbed me. Restrain her now." It was a lie. Kyle knew it was a lie. He'd watched the whole thing. Maya hadn't grabbed anyone. But Gloria's voice had that pitch of authority that overrode his conscience, and before he could think, he was moving. They wrestled Maya into the jump seat. She screamed. The sound was raw and terrified, and it was swallowed by the roar of the engine so that no one in the passenger cabin could hear it clearly. They wrenched her arms behind the rigid metal frame of the jump seat and cinched the zip ties tight. Too tight. The thick plastic bit into the soft skin of her wrists, and she cried out in pain. "You can't do this," Maya sobbed. "I can't breathe. I can't breathe." "Save the drama," Gloria hissed. She pulled the seatbelt across Maya's chest and yanked it tight, pinning the girl to the chair like an animal. "You sit here until we land, and if you make one more sound, I will gag you. Do you understand me? Not one sound." Gloria ripped the curtain open and marched back to first class. She stopped at row 1 and smiled at Mr. Whitfield. "I'm so sorry about the disturbance, sir. It's been handled. Can I refresh your drink?" Whitfield grunted and held out his glass. In the galley, Kyle stood frozen. He was staring at Maya. Her chest was heaving. The tears were streaming down her face. The zip ties were already leaving white pressure marks on her dark skin. "Water," Maya gasped. "Please, my inhaler, it's in my bag." Kyle looked at Maya's backpack, which Gloria had thrown into the corner like garbage. He took a step toward it. "Kyle," Gloria's voice crackled through the galley intercom. "Service check, now." Kyle stopped. He looked at the bag. He looked at Maya. He looked at the intercom. "I'll be right back," he whispered, and then he left. Maya was alone. The panic attack didn't build slowly. It crashed into her like a wave breaking over a seawall. Her throat constricted. The air that had felt thin before now felt non-existent. She pulled at the zip ties and the plastic sliced deeper into her wrists, and she could feel the blood, warm and wet, running down her fingers. Her heart was hammering so fast it felt like it was trying to escape her chest. She thought about her dad. She pictured his face, the one she'd been drawing on the iPad, the birthday hat, the smile. She tried to count backwards from 100, the way he'd taught her, but she couldn't get past 97. The numbers dissolved. The galley was getting darker. The edges of her vision were closing in. Dad, she thought, Dad, help me. 10 minutes passed. 20 minutes. The cold air from the overhead vent blew across her face, but it didn't matter. Her lungs couldn't process it. The oxygen wasn't reaching her blood. Her struggles grew weaker. The screaming had stopped. The crying had stopped. Her head drooped forward, chin touching her chest. Her fingers, still bound behind her, were turning blue. 30 minutes after Kyle had promised to come right back, he returned to the galley carrying a plastic cup of water. The galley was silent. "Miss," Kyle whispered, "I brought you some water." Maya didn't answer. Kyle stepped closer. "Miss? Hey, are you okay?" Nothing. Maya was slumped against the seatbelt, her head hanging at an angle that didn't look natural. She wasn't moving. Kyle dropped the cup. The water splashed across the floor and over Maya's sneakers. He grabbed her shoulder and shook her. Her head rolled back. Her eyes were half open, rolled up, showing nothing but white. "Gloria!" Kyle screamed. His voice cracked into something high and desperate that didn't sound like a man at all. "Gloria! She's not breathing!" The curtain ripped open. Gloria stood there, her face still arranged in its professional mask. She looked at Maya. The mask cracked. For one terrible second, everything Gloria had told herself about protocol and procedure and authority evaporated, and she saw what she had done. She saw an unconscious child tied to a chair with blue fingers and blood on her wrists. "Wake her up," Gloria said. Her voice was shaking. "She's faking it." Kyle shook Maya again. Her body was dead weight. She didn't react. She didn't groan. She didn't flinch. "She's not faking, Gloria. She's unconscious. We need a doctor right now." Gloria's face went white. Her eyes dropped to the zip ties cutting into Maya's wrists. Then her eyes moved to something she had ignored hours ago, the luggage tag on Maya's backpack. It was a first-class priority tag, printed by the airline's own system, with the name Richardson, M, in bold black letters. Gloria stared at that tag, the name she had dismissed, the proof she had refused to see. It had been there the entire time, hanging off the bag she'd thrown on the floor. "Oh, God," Gloria whispered. "We're landing in 20 minutes, Kyle said, his voice breaking. "What do we do?" Gloria's panic didn't turn into remorse. It turned into survival. "We stick to the story," she hissed, grabbing Kyle's arm. "She was violent. She assaulted me. We followed protocol. That's what happened. Do you hear me?" "She's unconscious, Gloria." "Keep your voice down." Gloria squeezed his arm hard enough to bruise. "Do you want to go to jail?" "We followed protocol. Now get the oxygen tank and pray to God she wakes up before we reach the gate." Kyle fumbled the portable oxygen unit from the emergency locker and pressed the mask over Maya's face. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold it steady. He watched the girl's chest. It rose slightly, fell, rose again, shallow, barely there. She didn't wake up. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm and routine. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our descent into John F. Kennedy International Airport. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." Gloria smoothed her hair. She checked her reflection in the steel surface of the coffee pot. She practiced her statement in her head. Passenger was non-compliant, threatened crew safety, restrained per protocol. She told herself the story so many times she almost believed it. But 3,000 miles below, on the ground at JFK, a phone was already ringing. Maya's smartwatch had done what Maya couldn't do for herself. It had detected a heart rate spike to 187 beats per minute, followed by a sudden crash, followed by near-zero movement for over 20 minutes. The watch had classified this as a critical medical emergency and sent an alert to Maya's emergency contact with her GPS coordinates. Derek Richardson was sitting in his car in the JFK cell phone lot. He had a birthday cake in the trunk. He was listening to Coltrane on the stereo, smiling, thinking about the look on Maya's face when she'd see him waiting at arrivals. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it. The notification was red. Not orange, not yellow. Red. Maya, critical distress, heart rate anomaly. Location, in flight. Altitude, 12,000 feet descending. Derek stared at the screen. The smile died on his face. He read it again. Critical distress. His daughter. His baby girl. He didn't call Maya. If she was in critical distress, she couldn't answer. He didn't call the airline. They would put him on hold and transfer him 3 times before anyone understood what he was saying. Derek Richardson had not built a billion-dollar empire by following the expected channels. He called John Carver, the chief of airport security at JFK, a man he'd known for a decade, a man who owed him more than one favor. "John," Derek said. His voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. The kind of calm that people who knew Derek Richardson understood meant that someone, somewhere, was about to have the worst day of their life. "Something is happening to my daughter on Pacific Alliance Flight 2207. She's in medical distress. The plane is landing in 15 minutes. I need to be on that tarmac when the wheels touch down. Right now, John. Not in 10 minutes. Now." There was a pause on the other end. Then John Carver said, "I'm sending a car to your location. Stay on the line." Derek hung up. He dialed another number, his chief of security. "Marcus, bring the team to JFK, Gate 42, full detail, and call an ambulance, private, have it on the tarmac." He put the car in drive and headed toward the airport, doing 90 on the Van Wyck Expressway. He didn't turn on the hazard lights. He didn't honk. He drove with the focused precision of a man who had decided that nothing, not traffic, not airport security, not the laws of physics, was going to stand between him and his daughter. The birthday cake slid off the back seat and hit the floor. Derek didn't notice. He was already gone. The father had left the building. What was coming to that aircraft was something else entirely. Flight PA-2207 touched down at 11:47 p.m. The landing was smooth. The passengers in the cabin applauded politely, the way people always do when a plane lands safely, not knowing that in the rear galley, a girl was dying. The captain's voice came on. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to New York. Local time is 11:47. We've been asked to hold position on the tarmac briefly for ground coordination. We'll have you at the gate shortly." Gloria exhaled. She assumed it was police. She assumed they were coming for Maya, the stowaway, the combative passenger she had manufactured in her own mind. Good. They would take the girl. They would validate everything Gloria had done. She smoothed her skirt one more time and walked toward the front of the plane to meet the authorities. She passed Mr. Whitfield in 1B. He was awake now, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. His phone was in his hand. The screen was dark, but the small red recording light was on. Gloria didn't notice. She reached the main cabin door just as the captain came out of the cockpit. His face was ashen. He'd just gotten off the radio with ground control, and whatever they'd told him had turned a 30-year veteran into a man who looked like he was going to be sick. "Gloria," the captain said, "what happened in the rear galley?" "Captain, I have it under control. The passenger is—" "What happened, Gloria?" She hesitated. Something in his voice was different. Something was very wrong. "She was non-compliant. I followed Protocol 7C. She's restrained in the jump seat. She had a medical episode, but Kyle administered oxygen and—" "Ground control just informed me," the captain said slowly, "that Derek Richardson is on the tarmac. He's demanding to board this aircraft." Gloria stared at him. "Who?" "Derek Richardson," the captain repeated. "The girl's father. He runs Richardson Capital." The name didn't register. Gloria didn't follow finance. She didn't read the business pages. She didn't know the names of the men who moved markets and made empires. "So," Gloria said, "he can meet his daughter at the gate like everyone else." The captain looked at her like she had just signed her own death warrant. "Gloria, there are 6 black SUVs on the tarmac. There's a private ambulance. There are 2 Port Authority cruisers. The man out there is worth $4 billion, and his daughter is unconscious in our galley. Do you understand what is happening right now?" The blood drained from Gloria's face so fast that she swayed on her feet. She reached for the bulkhead to steady herself. $4 billion. The words echoed in her skull. She turned and looked down the aisle toward the galley curtain, behind which an unconscious 17-year-old girl was zip-tied to a jump seat with blue fingers and bloody wrists. "Cut them off," Gloria whispered. "Kyle, cut the cuffs off, right now." The captain stared at her. "You're worried about the cuffs? Gloria, that girl could be dead." "She's not dead," Gloria hissed. "She's breathing. Just get those ties off her before he—" A sound from the front of the aircraft cut her off. The main cabin door was opening, not from the inside. Someone on the ground had activated the external release. And then a voice filled the first-class cabin. It wasn't a shout. It was something worse than a shout. It was a command that carried the weight of a man who had never, not once in his life, been told no. "Where is my daughter?" Derek Richardson stepped onto the aircraft. He was wearing a bespoke charcoal suit. His tie was undone. His face was a mask of controlled fury that made the air around him feel 10 degrees colder. Behind him were 2 private security guards, each one built like a defensive lineman, and a paramedic team carrying a stretcher and emergency equipment. Derek's eyes swept the first-class cabin. He saw seat 1A, empty. He turned to the captain. "She was in 1A. Where is she?" The captain couldn't speak. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. He raised a trembling hand and pointed toward the rear of the aircraft, toward the galley. Derek moved. The passengers in first class pressed back into their seats as he passed. He reached the galley curtain and ripped it aside with one hand. And then he saw her. Maya was slumped in the jump seat. The oxygen mask was crooked on her face. Her head was hanging forward. Her wrists were still behind the chair, and Kyle was on his knees beside her, sawing desperately at the last zip tie with a pair of safety scissors. Derek made a sound. It wasn't a word. It was something that came from a place deeper than language, a sound that every parent in the world would recognize, the sound of a father seeing his child broken. He shoved Kyle aside. The young flight attendant crashed into the beverage cart and fell to the floor. Derek dropped to his knees in front of his daughter. He touched her face. Cold, clammy. He looked at her wrists. Purple, swollen, bleeding where the plastic had cut through skin. "Tiffany," he said. Then he caught himself. "Maya. Maya, baby, can you hear me? It's Dad. I'm here. I'm right here." She didn't respond. Her breathing was a thin, rattling whisper behind the oxygen mask. "Medics!" Derek roared. "Get in here, now!" The paramedic team pushed into the tiny galley. "Sir, we need you to step back. We need to assess her." "She's handcuffed," Derek said. His voice broke on the word. He stood up. He looked at the zip tie still attached to his daughter's right wrist, the plastic buried so deep in her skin that it had disappeared into the swelling. He looked at the seatbelt pulled tight across her chest. He looked at her fingers. Blue. Dark. Wrong. Derek turned around. Gloria Henson was standing at the edge of the galley, pressed against the fuselage wall, trying to make herself as small as possible. She was shaking. Derek looked at her name tag. He looked at her face. He stepped toward her. "Did you do this?" Gloria opened her mouth. She didn't have a valid ticket. She was aggressive. I followed protocol." "Did you do this to my daughter?" I didn't know who she was." Derek's eyes changed. Something behind them went very still and very dark. "You didn't know who she was," he repeated. "She's 17 years old. She's a concert pianist. Those hands that you crushed with your zip ties, those are her life. She told you she had asthma. She told you her name. She begged you for her inhaler. And you didn't know who she was?" "Sir, she's got a weak pulse," the medic called out. "Respiratory distress. We're moving her now." Derek turned away from Gloria like she had ceased to exist. "Go. Get her out of here." They cut the last zip tie. They lifted Maya onto the stretcher. Her arms fell limp at her sides, and Derek caught her right hand. He held it gently, the way you hold something that might shatter. The paramedics carried her down the aisle of the aircraft, past every single passenger who had been on that flight, past the business class travelers who had slept through a child's screams, past Mr. Whitfield, who was still holding up his phone, recording, past the empty seat 1A, where a birthday portrait was still open on a cracked iPad that nobody had bothered to pick up. At the aircraft door, Derek stopped. He turned back. The captain, Gloria, and Kyle were standing in the aisle, frozen, a tableau of guilt and fear. "Don't leave this airport," Derek said. His voice was quiet, quieter than anything he'd said before, and that quietness was the most terrifying sound anyone on that plane had ever heard. "I'm having the FAA ground this aircraft. By the time I get to the hospital, none of you will have jobs. By the time my daughter opens her eyes, none of you will have careers. And if she doesn't open her eyes..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Derek walked off the plane and into the night. The cabin was silent for a long time. Then Mr. Whitfield in 1B slowly put down his phone. He looked at Gloria, who was still standing in the aisle, her face the color of old paper. "Lady," Whitfield said, "I just looked up Derek Richardson. Do you have any idea what you just did?" Gloria didn't answer. She couldn't. Her legs gave out and she sat down in the nearest seat, staring at nothing. Kyle was still on the galley floor. He was holding Maya's iPad. He'd found it kicked under the beverage cart during the chaos. The screen was cracked, but still lit. He looked at the drawing, the portrait of a father in a birthday hat, the words in the corner. "Happy 50th, Dad. Thanks for being my wings." Kyle pressed the iPad against his chest and sobbed. The ambulance hit 90 on the Van Wyck Expressway. Every bump in the road sent a jolt through Derek's spine, but he didn't move. He was holding Maya's hand, the left one, because the paramedic was working on the right. Sarah, the lead medic, had cut away the remains of the zip tie that Kyle hadn't finished sawing through, and what was underneath made Derek's jaw clench so hard his teeth ached. The skin was split open, not scraped, split. The plastic had been pulled so tight that it had acted like a wire, slicing into the tissue. The wrist was swollen to nearly twice its normal size, and the fingers were still blue, still cold, still wrong. "Talk to me," Derek said. "Is she stable?" Sarah checked the cardiac monitor. "Her pulse is thready but holding. Oxygen levels are climbing now that she's on the high-flow mask. She's breathing on her own, Mr. Richardson, but she's deeply unconscious. Why won't she wake up?" "Her body shut itself down," Sarah said carefully. "The panic attack restricted her airway. Without her inhaler, without intervention, the oxygen deprivation hit critical levels. Combined with the physical restraint cutting off circulation to her extremities, her nervous system went into protective shock. It's like a circuit breaker tripping." "A circuit breaker," Derek repeated. He looked at his daughter's face. She looked 12 years old. She looked like the little girl who used to fall asleep on his chest while he watched football on Sundays. "When does the circuit breaker flip back?" Sarah didn't answer right away, and that silence told Derek more than any words could. They arrived at Jamaica Hospital at 12:19 a.m. The emergency team was already waiting at the ambulance bay. They transferred Maya to a gurney and rushed her through the double doors. Derek followed until a nurse stopped him at the entrance to the trauma unit. "Sir, you need to wait here. The team needs space to work." "That's my daughter." "I know, sir, and the best thing you can do for her right now is let us do our jobs. Someone will update you as soon as we have her stabilized." Derek stood in that hallway for 11 minutes. He counted every second. He paced 4 steps forward, 4 steps back. His phone was vibrating constantly in his pocket, but he ignored it. The only call he was waiting for was from the other side of those double doors. At 12:30, he made 2 calls. The first was to David Mercer. David picked up on the second ring, even though it was past midnight. David Mercer didn't have normal hours. He was Derek's chief legal officer, and in certain circles of New York law, people called him the surgeon because of the way he could dissect an opponent's case with cold, clinical precision. "David, I need you at Jamaica Hospital, now." "What's going on?" They handcuffed Maya on the plane, Derek said. The words came out flat, controlled. But David had known Derek for 15 years, and he could hear the earthquake underneath. They zip-tied a 17-year-old girl to a chair and left her until she stopped breathing. She's in the trauma unit right now. I don't know if she's going to wake up. Silence. Then David said, I'm leaving my house right now. I'll be there in 30 minutes. And Derek? Yeah? Don't talk to anyone. Not press, not police, not the airline. Not a single word until I'm standing next to you. I'm not talking to anyone tonight, David. Tonight is about Maya. But tomorrow, I want you to freeze everything. The airline's assets, the flight manifest, the crew records, the cockpit voice recordings, the gate surveillance, everything. I want Pacific Alliance Airways to wake up tomorrow morning and realize they don't own their own company anymore. I'll start the calls from the car. Derek hung up. He made his second call. This one was harder. This one required him to say words that no father should ever have to say to his child's mother. Camille Richardson answered on the first ring. She was on shift at Mount Sinai, 3 hours into a 12-hour rotation in the pediatric surgical unit. Hey, did she land? Is she surprised to see you? Derek closed his eyes. Camille, I need you to come to Jamaica Hospital. The pause lasted 2 seconds, but it contained a lifetime. Camille was a surgeon. She understood the geography of New York hospitals the way a general understands a battlefield. Jamaica Hospital was in Queens. It had a level 1 trauma center and a neurological ICU. Nobody went to Jamaica Hospital for a headache. What happened? Her voice changed. The warmth vanished. The surgeon appeared. Derek, what happened to Maya? She's alive, Derek said quickly, because he knew that was the first thing she needed to hear. She's unconscious. They're working on her now. Something happened on the plane. The flight crew restrained her. She had a panic attack, and they didn't give her the inhaler, and she lost consciousness. Restrained her how? Zip ties behind her back for at least 45 minutes. Camille didn't scream. She didn't cry. She went completely silent. And Derek knew that silence. It was the same silence she brought to the operating room when a case went wrong. The silence of a mind processing catastrophic information and already calculating the response. I'm leaving now, Camille said. Have them check for compartment syndrome in both wrists. If the circulation was cut off for 45 minutes, the nerve damage could be... Camille, I know, I'm coming. She hung up. Derek put his phone in his pocket and pressed his forehead against the cold wall of the hospital corridor. He stayed like that for a long time. Camille arrived at 1:15 a.m. She was still wearing her scrubs. She hadn't stopped to change, hadn't stopped for anything. She walked into the waiting room and Derek stood up. The moment she saw his face, the surgical composure fractured. She crossed the room and he caught her. Where is she? Camille asked, her voice muffled against his chest. They moved her to the neurological ICU 20 minutes ago. She's sedated. They're keeping her blood pressure down. Sedated? Why? What are they worried about? Derek took her hands. The doctor said the oxygen deprivation may have caused some swelling. They're monitoring. Swelling where, Derek? He didn't want to say it. The brain. Camille pulled away from him. Her eyes were dry, but they were burning. Take me to her, right now. They walked into the ICU room together. The machines beeped in steady rhythm. Maya lay in the bed with an endotracheal tube taped to her mouth because her throat had swollen shut from the trauma. Her arms were elevated on pillows. Both wrists were wrapped in thick bandages, but the tips of her fingers were visible, dark, swollen, discolored. Camille stopped at the foot of the bed. She looked at the monitors. She looked at the IV lines. She looked at her daughter's hands. Those hands that had been playing scales at 4 years old. Those hands that had earned a full scholarship to Juilliard. Those hands that could make a Steinway grand piano sound like it was singing. Nerve compression, Camille said quietly. It wasn't a question. The plastic surgeon just left, Derek said. The radial nerve in her right hand is compromised. They don't know the extent yet. Who did this? A woman named Gloria Henson, chief purser, and a kid named Kyle Pruitt who helped her. They're in police custody. Camille touched Maya's forehead, gently, the way she touched her patients before surgery, checking temperature by instinct. Custody isn't enough, she said. I want them erased, Derek. I want the airline that hired them, trained them, and gave them the authority to do this to a child. I want it gone. It will be, Derek said. I promise you that. Don't promise me, Camille said. Show me. At that same hour, 7 miles away, Gloria Henson was sitting on a metal bench in the holding cells of Queen's Central Booking. They had taken her uniform jacket. They had taken her scarf. They had taken her phone, her watch, and her shoes. She was sitting in her flight blouse and skirt, shivering under the fluorescent lights, and she was telling herself a story. The story went like this. She had followed protocol. The girl was non-compliant. The girl was in the wrong seat. The girl was aggressive. Gloria had 22 years of service. She had a union. She had a pension coming in 3 years. This was a misunderstanding. A rich man was throwing his weight around because his daughter got caught scamming the system. By morning, the union rep would have her out, and this would become a footnote in her file. Gloria told herself this story over and over, like a prayer. She almost believed it. At 2:40 a.m., a guard came to the bars. Miller, your lawyer's here. They led her to a small meeting room. A man in a wrinkled suit was sitting at the table. Frank DeLuca, union-appointed attorney. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, even though Gloria's case was only hours old. Frank, Gloria said, sitting down fast, thank God. You have to get me out of here. This is insane. I was doing my job. Frank didn't open his briefcase. He didn't pull out a notepad. He just looked at her. Brenda, shut up. Gloria blinked. Excuse me? I just came from the DA's office, Frank said. He leaned forward, and Gloria noticed his hands were shaking slightly. Do you know what they have? They have nothing. That girl was a threat. They have a video, Gloria. Frank's voice was flat, dead flat. A passenger in 1B, high definition, audio and video. He started recording the moment you snatched the phone out of that girl's hand. The cold knot that had been sitting in Gloria's stomach since the tarmac pulled tighter. The video shows the girl sitting in her assigned seat, Frank recited, drawing on an iPad. It shows you taking her phone without permission. It shows you removing her from her seat while she repeatedly tells you she has a valid ticket. It shows you dragging her past business class while she cries. And the audio from the cockpit voice recorder, which picks up the open galley mic, that's even worse. What does it pick up? Gloria whispered. Frank looked at his notes. It picks up you ordering Kyle Pruitt to restrain a minor. It picks up the girl begging you not to tie her up because she has asthma. It picks up you telling her to shut up or you'll gag her. It picks up 30 minutes of silence. And then it picks up Kyle Pruitt screaming that she's not breathing, and you saying, and I'm quoting directly here, she's faking it. Keep her tied up. Gloria's mouth opened. Nothing came out. The DA is charging you with false imprisonment, assault in the second degree, and child endangerment, Frank said. And because of the severity of the injuries, they're looking at a depraved indifference enhancement. That's not a misdemeanor, Gloria. That's felony time. I have 22 years of service, Gloria said. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, thin and reedy, like it was coming from very far away. I have a clean record. I was 3 years from my pension. Frank closed his file. He stood up. He looked at her with the expression of a man who has delivered bad news 1,000 times and has stopped feeling sorry about it. Forget the pension, Gloria. You're going to be lucky if you see the outside of a cell before you turn 60. I want a different lawyer, Gloria said. That's your right, Frank said. He picked up his briefcase. But I'll tell you something for free. Derek Richardson's legal team filed an emergency injunction 30 minutes ago. They've frozen your bank accounts, your retirement fund, and your union benefits pending the outcome of a civil suit. You couldn't afford a different lawyer if you wanted one. He walked out. The door clicked shut. Gloria sat alone under the buzzing fluorescent light and felt the walls of the room closing in, the same way the walls had closed in on Maya in that galley. But there was no one coming to save Gloria. Back at Jamaica Hospital, 4:15 a.m., David Mercer arrived with a rolling briefcase and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He found Derek in the hallway outside the ICU, standing with his arms crossed, staring at the floor. "How is she?" David asked. "Stable, sedated. They're worried about her hands." David nodded once. "Then let's make sure they pay for every finger." He opened the briefcase on a chair and pulled out a laptop. "I've been on the phone since you called. Here's where we are. I've filed for emergency preservation of all flight records, cockpit voice data, and passenger manifests for flight PA-2207. I've contacted the FAA and filed a formal complaint. The aircraft is grounded." "Good. I've initiated discovery requests against Pacific Alliance Airways for all internal communications related to cabin security protocols, profiling guidelines, and crew training materials for the past 5 years. What about the memo?" David looked up. "What memo?" 3 months ago, Derek said, "I heard a rumor through my logistics network that Pacific Alliance issued an internal directive to flight crews. Something about being aggressive with ticket verification on international first-class routes. Something about clearing first class of passengers who didn't match a certain profile. I didn't pay attention at the time. I'm paying attention now." David's eyes narrowed. "If that memo exists, and if it instructs crews to profile passengers based on appearance, that's not just negligence, that's systemic discrimination. That turns a personal injury case into a class action." "Find it," Derek said. "I'll need access to their internal servers." Derek looked at him. "Pacific Alliance's IT infrastructure is managed by Corbin Logistics. I bought a controlling stake in Corbin 6 months ago for an unrelated deal. I own their data, David. All of it." David Mercer smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a surgeon picking up a scalpel. "Then by morning, we'll have everything." Derek's phone rang. It was Marcus, his chief of security, calling from the airport. "Boss, the Port Authority just took the flight crew into custody. Gloria Henson and Kyle Pruitt are being transported to Queens Central Booking. The captain has been separated for questioning. And there's something else." "What?" "The passenger in 1B. Guy named Whitfield. He approached our team at the gate. He has video. Full video from the moment Henson approached Maya's seat to the moment you carried her off the plane. He wants to give it to you directly. He says he's willing to testify." Derek closed his eyes. "Tell him David Mercer will contact him in the morning. And Marcus, make sure that video gets to David tonight. Multiple copies, multiple servers. I don't want anyone making that footage disappear." "Already done, boss." At 5:30 a.m., the sun was beginning to lighten the sky over Queens. Derek was sitting in a chair beside Maya's bed, holding her left hand, when her fingers twitched, just slightly. A tiny contraction, like a muscle remembering how to work. Derek leaned forward. "Maya? Baby, can you hear me?" Nothing. The machines beeped steadily. The ventilator hissed. But her fingers had moved. He was sure of it. Camille was asleep on the small couch in the corner, still in her scrubs, still in the position she'd collapsed into an hour ago. Derek didn't wake her. He just held Maya's hand and waited. At 6 a.m., Derek's phone buzzed. A text from David Mercer. 4 words. "Found the memo. It's worse than you thought." Derek read those words. He looked at his daughter. He looked at the bandages on her wrists, the tube in her throat, the monitors tracking her heartbeat in green lines across a black screen. He typed back 3 words. "Burn them all." At that moment, 6 miles away, the trading floor was about to open, and someone at Pacific Alliance Airways headquarters was about to see Mr. Whitfield's video, because it had already been uploaded to the internet at 3:47 a.m. By 6:15, it had 400,000 views. By 7, it had 2 million. By the time Richard Calloway, CEO of Pacific Alliance Airways, walked into his corner office with a coffee and a Wall Street Journal tucked under his arm, it had 7 million views. The hashtag Boycott Pacific Alliance was trending #1 in the United States, and his phone was ringing with a call from the chairman of the board that would change his life forever. Richard Calloway didn't answer the phone right away. He took a sip of his coffee first. It was the last peaceful sip of coffee he would ever take. Richard Calloway set his coffee down at 7:14 a.m. and finally answered his phone. The chairman of the board didn't say good morning. He didn't say hello. He said, "Richard, have you been on the internet in the last 4 hours?" "I just walked in, Charles. What's going on?" "Turn on any television. Open any browser. Type in the name of your airline." Richard Calloway typed Pacific Alliance Airways into Google. The first result was a video with 9 million views and climbing. The thumbnail showed a teenage girl slumped in a jump seat with blue fingers and blood on her wrists. The title read, "Pacific Alliance Flight Crew Handcuffs Black Teen in First Class Until She Passes Out." The second result was a trending hashtag. The third result was a Reuters breaking news alert. The fourth result was his company's stock ticker, and it was deep, ugly red. "Charles, I'll call you back." "You'll call me back in 30 minutes with a plan, Richard. The board is meeting at noon whether you're ready or not." Calloway hung up and pressed the intercom on his desk. "Janet, get me the head of PR, the chief legal officer, and the VP of operations in this boardroom in 15 minutes. Cancel everything else today." "Sir, you're 9 o'clock with the—" "Cancel everything, Janet." At 7:30 a.m., the boardroom at Pacific Alliance headquarters was filling with people who looked like they hadn't slept. Margaret Chen, the PR director, had bags under her eyes and a stack of printouts 6 inches thick. Robert Avery, the chief legal officer, was already on his phone with outside counsel. 3 junior executives sat along the wall, afraid to speak. "How bad is it?" Calloway asked. Margaret didn't sugarcoat it. "The video has 12 million views. It's on CNN, MSNBC, Fox, BBC, Al Jazeera. The hashtag Boycott Pacific Alliance has been trending #1 in the U.S. for 3 hours, and it just hit #1 globally. We've had 460 media inquiries since 5 a.m. Our social media accounts are being flooded. I had to take down our Facebook page because the comments were threatening violence against our employees." "What's the stock doing?" "Down 11% at pre-market. Trading hasn't even opened yet." Calloway turned to Robert Avery. "Legal exposure?" "Massive," Avery said. "The girl is 17. She's a minor. The crew used physical restraints on a minor passenger without documented cause of an active physical assault. That's a federal violation. The FAA has already opened an investigation. The DOT is making noise. And the girl's father is Derek Richardson." Calloway had looked up the name 30 seconds after Charles called. He knew exactly who Derek Richardson was. "What has Richardson done so far?" His legal team filed an emergency injunction at 4 a.m. to preserve all flight records and crew communications. The aircraft is grounded by FAA order. Both crew members are in custody at Queens Central Booking, and Richardson's chief legal officer is David Mercer. The room went silent. Everyone in corporate law knew David Mercer. He had won a $2 billion discrimination settlement against a hotel chain 3 years ago. He had bankrupted a pharmaceutical company in 18 months over a wrongful death case. David Mercer didn't negotiate. He destroyed. "We need to get ahead of this," Calloway said. "Margaret, draft a statement. Express horror at the actions of a rogue employee. Make clear that Gloria Henson acted independently and in violation of Pacific Alliance policy. Frame it as an isolated incident." "Richard," Margaret said slowly, "there's a problem with that narrative." "What problem?" Margaret pulled a sheet of paper from her stack and slid it across the table. "This was forwarded to me an hour ago by someone in our IT department. It's a screenshot of an internal memo you sent 3 months ago to all chief pursers on international routes." Calloway looked at the paper. His face didn't change, but his hands went still. "The memo instructs crews to, and I'm reading your words here, exercise aggressive verification of first-class passengers who do not match traditional clientele profiles on premium routes," Margaret said. It also recommends clearing seats for standby Diamond Medallion members when ticket authenticity is in question. "Richard, this memo is a profiling directive. If this gets out, Gloria Henson isn't a rogue employee. She's a soldier following your orders." That memo was an internal operational guideline, Calloway said. It was about fraud prevention. It doesn't say fraud prevention, Margaret said. It says non-traditional clientele profiles. Any first-year law student can tell you what that means. Who else has seen this? Calloway demanded. That's the other problem, Robert Avery said, putting down his phone. I just got off the phone with our IT vendor, Corbin Logistics. They informed me that as of 6 o'clock this morning, Corbin Logistics is under new management. Derek Richardson's holding company acquired a controlling stake in Corbin through an offshore subsidiary. He now has legal access to every server, every email, every internal document that Corbin manages on our behalf. Calloway stared at him. He bought our IT company? He bought our IT company. In the middle of the night? He had the controlling stake already. He activated the acquisition clause at 4 a.m. The paperwork was filed by 6. It's done, Richard. He owns our data. Calloway sat back in his chair. For the first time in his career, the man who prided himself on being the smartest person in any room felt the floor shifting beneath him. Derek Richardson wasn't just a grieving father. He was a tactician, and he had started moving his pieces before the plane even landed. Offer a settlement, Calloway said. Call Richardson directly. Start at $5 million. Go up to 15, 20 if you have to. Richard, Robert said, I don't think you understand what's happening. This isn't a negotiation. Richardson isn't trying to get money from us. He's trying to... The boardroom doors swung open. Janet, Calloway's assistant, stood in the doorway. She was pale. Sir, Derek Richardson is in the lobby. He's asking to see you. Tell him to make an appointment. Sir, he's not alone. He has a legal team and private security. And building security just informed me that he owns this building. The room went dead silent. He what? Calloway whispered. Pacific Alliance leases these offices from the Meridian Real Estate Trust. Mr. Richardson's holding company acquired Meridian 6 months ago as part of a larger portfolio deal. He is technically your landlord, sir. Building security has granted him access. Calloway looked at Robert Avery. Avery had gone white. He looked at Margaret Chen. She was already gathering her papers, distancing herself physically from the table. The junior executives along the wall hadn't moved. They looked like statues. Let him in, Calloway said. Derek Richardson walked into the boardroom at 9:17 a.m. He was wearing a charcoal suit that fit him like armor. His face was clean-shaven. His eyes were clear. If you didn't know that he'd spent the night in a hospital watching his daughter breathe through a tube, you'd never guess it. He looked rested. He looked calm. He looked like a man who had already won and was simply here to deliver the verdict. David Mercer walked in behind him carrying a thin leather briefcase. 2 security personnel took positions outside the door. Mr. Richardson, Calloway said, standing. He extended his hand. I'm glad you came in. We were just discussing how to reach out to you. Please, sit down. Let's talk about how we can make this right. Derek didn't shake his hand. He didn't sit down. He walked to the opposite end of the table, 20 feet from Calloway, and placed a single manila folder on the polished mahogany surface. I'm not here for a settlement, Richard. I don't want your money. I have more money than you. Then what do you want? Name it. I want accountability. You have it. Gloria Henson has been terminated effective this morning. The entire crew of Flight 2207 has been suspended pending investigation. We are cooperating fully with the FAA and the DOT. You fired a woman who's already in jail, Derek said. That's not accountability. That's housekeeping. He tapped the manila folder. Open it. Calloway reached across the table and opened the folder. Inside was a single document. He recognized it immediately because he had written it. The internal memo, the one about aggressive verification, the one about non-traditional clientele. His signature was at the bottom. Where did you get this? Calloway's voice dropped. I told you, I own your data. This is a privileged internal communication. You can't use this. I'm not using it, Derek said. Not yet. Right now, I'm showing it to you. The question is what you're going to do about it before I show it to everyone else. This memo is about fraud prevention, Calloway said. It has nothing to do with what happened on that plane. Derek looked at him. The look was patient, almost pitiful, the way you look at someone who doesn't realize they're already drowning. Richard, I sat in a hospital room last night and watched a plastic surgeon examine my daughter's hands. She's a concert pianist. She was accepted to Juilliard. The nerve in her right hand is damaged because your flight crew zip-tied her wrist so tight that the blood stopped flowing for 45 minutes. The doctor told me she might never play again. Calloway opened his mouth to speak. "I'm not finished," Derek said, and Calloway's mouth closed. "My daughter told your crew her name. She showed them her boarding pass. She begged them to verify her ticket. She begged them for her inhaler. She told them she had asthma. She told them she had a panic disorder. She told them to call me. She told them to Google my name. Your chief purser ignored every single word, dragged her out of the seat I paid $6,000 for, zip-tied her to a jump seat, threatened to gag her, and walked away to pour a man a scotch while my daughter suffocated alone in a dark galley." Nobody in the room breathed. "And she did all of that," Derek continued, "because my daughter is a black girl in a hoodie, and your memo told her that black girls in hoodies don't belong in first class." "That's not what the memo says," Calloway protested weakly. "That's exactly what the memo says, and you know it, and every jury in America will know it when David puts it on a screen in a courtroom." David Mercer opened his briefcase and pulled out a second document. "This is the civil complaint we filed this morning in the Southern District of New York. It names Gloria Henson, Kyle Pruitt, Captain James Wheeler, Pacific Alliance Airways as a corporate entity, and you personally, Mr. Calloway, for systemic racial discrimination, corporate negligence, and deliberate infliction of emotional distress on a minor." "You can't name me personally," Calloway said. "You signed the memo," David replied. "You created the policy environment that led directly to the assault on a child. You are personally liable." Calloway looked around the table. Not one of his executives would meet his eyes. Margaret Chen was staring at the table. Robert Avery was studying his phone. The junior executives had stopped breathing. Derek pulled the small remote from his pocket and pointed it at the display screen mounted on the boardroom wall. The stock chart that had been showing Pacific Alliance's cratering share price disappeared. In its place was a live news feed, a press conference happening right now on the sidewalk outside this building. Camille Richardson was at the podium. She was wearing a white blouse, and her face was steady, composed, and devastating. Next to her stood Mr. Whitfield, the passenger from seat 1B, and next to him, in a wrinkled shirt with dark circles under his eyes, stood Kyle Pruitt. "Kyle turned witness," Calloway whispered. "His lawyer called David at 7 this morning," Derek said. "Kyle is 24 years old. He made a terrible decision because he was afraid of losing his job. He's going to live with that for the rest of his life. But he's willing to tell the truth, all of it, including the part about your memo, including the part about your zero-tolerance policy for crew hesitation, including the part where Gloria told him she'd destroy his career if he didn't restrain a 17-year-old girl." On the screen, Camille leaned into the microphone. "My daughter woke up this morning at 6 a.m. The first thing she asked for was her father. The second thing she asked was whether she would ever play the piano again. The doctors couldn't answer that question. What I can tell you is that Maya Richardson did everything right. She had a ticket. She was polite. She was compliant. She moved when they told her to move. She showed her boarding pass when they asked. And none of it mattered, because the moment Gloria Henson looked at my daughter, she decided that a black girl in a hoodie couldn't possibly belong in first class. That decision nearly killed my child." Camille paused. The cameras flashed. "We are not here to ask for sympathy. We are here to ask for change. No child of any color should ever be treated the way my daughter was treated on that airplane. And no corporation should be allowed to create policies that target passengers based on the color of their skin and then hide behind the word protocol when those policies destroy a child's life." Derek turned off the screen. The boardroom was so quiet that they could hear the protesters who had already gathered on the sidewalk 16 floors below, chanting something that the walls of the glass tower couldn't quite muffle. The board is meeting at noon, Derek said. He checked his watch. I know because I called the chairman this morning. I'm a major shareholder now, Richard. I bought 8% of Pacific Alliance stock at 4 a.m. when it was in free fall. David filed the shareholder notification before breakfast. You bought our stock? Calloway said. His voice sounded hollow. I bought the dip, Derek said, and at the board meeting, I am going to motion for your immediate removal as CEO under the gross negligence clause in your employment contract. The clause that says you can be terminated for cause if your actions bring, and I'm quoting, material public disrepute to the corporation. Your stock is down 19%. Your airline is trending worldwide for torturing a child. Your internal memo is about to become a federal exhibit. I'd say that qualifies. If you remove me, you tank the stock further, Calloway said. It was his last card. The company needs stability. The company needs a soul, Derek said. And you don't have one. He buttoned his jacket. Fired for cause, Richard. No golden parachute, no severance, no consulting deal, nothing. You walk out of this building with what's in your pockets. Derek turned and walked toward the door. David Mercer gathered the documents and followed. At the door, Derek stopped. Richard. Calloway looked up. He looked 10 years older than he had an hour ago. My daughter is 17, Derek said. She drew me a birthday picture on that plane. She was coming home to surprise me. She was sitting in her seat, bothering no one, drawing a portrait of her father in a birthday hat. And your airline put her in handcuffs until she stopped breathing. Think about that when you're explaining to your own family why you lost everything. He walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like the last nail in a coffin. Richard Calloway sat at the head of the table. His phone was ringing. It was the chairman again. The stock ticker on his computer showed Pacific Alliance down 21% and falling. The protesters outside were getting louder. His chief legal officer was packing his briefcase, already preparing to distance himself. Margaret Chen stood up, straightened her jacket, and said, I'm going downstairs to face the press. I won't defend the memo, Richard. I'm going to tell them the truth. Margaret, if you go down there, then fire me. She walked out. One by one, the executives filed out of the boardroom. Nobody looked at Calloway. Nobody spoke to him. The room emptied like water draining from a sink until Richard Calloway was sitting alone at the head of a 20-foot mahogany table with a cold cup of coffee and a phone that wouldn't stop ringing. He picked it up. Richard, the chairman said, the board has moved the meeting to 10 a.m. We're not waiting until noon. Your presence is optional. Charles, I can explain. Your presence is optional, Richard. I'd suggest you use the next hour to call your personal attorney. The line went dead. At 10:47 a.m., the board of directors of Pacific Alliance Airways voted unanimously to terminate Richard Calloway as CEO, effective immediately, for cause. The vote took 6 minutes. No one spoke in his defense. His access badge was deactivated before he reached the elevator. Building security escorted him through the lobby, past the marble fountain with the Pacific Alliance logo, and out the front doors, where a wall of cameras and reporters were waiting. Richard Calloway covered his face with his hand and pushed through the crowd. A reporter shoved a microphone at him. Mr. Calloway, do you have a response to the Richardson family? He didn't answer. He climbed into a cab and disappeared into Manhattan traffic. The cab driver recognized him from the news and spent the entire ride in uncomfortable silence. At 11 a.m., Derek Richardson was back at Jamaica Hospital. He walked into Maya's room, sat down beside her bed, and took her hand. Camille was on the other side, adjusting the IV drip. It's done? Camille asked. Calloway's out. The board fired him for cause. No severance. Good. David's filing the federal discrimination suit this afternoon. The DOJ is opening an investigation into the airline's profiling practices. Whitfield's video has 43 million views. Kyle Pruitt is cooperating fully, and Gloria Henson's bail hearing is in 2 hours. David is going to argue she's a flight risk. Camille nodded. She looked at Maya. The ventilator was gone. They had removed the tube an hour ago when Maya's throat swelling had gone down enough for her to breathe on her own. She was still sedated, but lighter now. The doctors were bringing her up slowly. She squeezed my hand, Camille said quietly. 20 minutes ago. I was talking to her about nothing, just rambling, telling her about Mrs. Patterson's cat getting stuck in the tree again, and she squeezed. Derek felt his eyes burn. He leaned forward. Maya? Baby, it's Dad. I'm here. I'm right here. Squeeze my hand if you can hear me. 5 seconds passed. 10. Then Maya's fingers twitched. Just barely. Just enough. And then they closed, weakly, around Derek's hand. Derek pressed his forehead against the bed rail and wept. He wept for the first time since he'd found her on that plane. All the rage, all the strategy, all the cold precision he'd used to dismantle an empire in 12 hours, it all dissolved. And what was left was just a father holding his daughter's hand, grateful that she was still alive to hold it back. Maya opened her eyes at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, 2 days after flight PA 2207 had landed at JFK. The first thing she saw was a ceiling she didn't recognize. White tiles. Fluorescent lights dimmed to a soft glow. The first thing she heard was a beeping sound, steady and rhythmic, coming from somewhere to her right. The first thing she felt was her father's hand wrapped around hers, warm and solid, and she knew before she fully woke up that something terrible had happened, because Derek Richardson did not hold her hand while she slept unless the world had gone wrong. Dad? Her voice came out as a whisper, raw and scraped, like someone had taken sandpaper to the inside of her throat. Derek was on his feet before the word finished leaving her mouth. I'm here. I'm right here, baby. Don't try to talk too much. Your throat is going to be sore. Where am I? Jamaica Hospital. You're safe. You're okay. Maya blinked. Her mind was foggy, thick with sedation, but pieces were coming back. The plane. The woman, the galley, the zip ties. She tried to lift her right hand, and a bolt of pain shot from her wrist to her elbow, so sharp that she gasped. Don't move your hands, Derek said quickly. They're bandaged. The doctors are taking care of them. Maya looked down. Both of her arms were resting on pillows, wrapped in white bandages from the knuckles to halfway up her forearms. The tips of her fingers were visible. They were swollen and discolored, but they were pink now, not the terrible blue they had been on the plane. She stared at them. Then she stared at her father. She wouldn't let me breathe, Maya said, her eyes filled with tears. I told her I had asthma. I told her my name. I told her to call you. She wouldn't listen. She said I didn't belong there, Dad. She said the only mistake was letting me board. Derek sat on the edge of the bed. He didn't trust himself to speak for a moment, because the rage was right there, right behind his teeth, and Maya didn't need his rage. She needed her father. I know, he said. I know everything that happened, and I promise you, she will never do that to anyone again. My hands, Maya whispered. She was looking at her fingers, moving them slightly, testing. The left hand responded, slow but functional. The right hand barely moved at all. The ring finger and pinky finger on her right hand stayed still, while the others twitched weakly. Dad, my hands don't feel right. Derek took a breath. The doctor said there's some nerve damage from the restraints. They're going to do more tests. There's a specialist coming tomorrow. Can I still play? The question hit Derek like a freight train. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals without flinching. He had fired executives and crashed stock prices and dismantled corporations with surgical precision. But his 17-year-old daughter looking up at him from a hospital bed and asking if she could still play the piano, that broke something inside him that all the money in the world couldn't fix. We're going to figure that out, he said. Whatever it takes, whatever it costs, we're going to get you back. The door opened. Camille walked in, carrying a cup of ice chips. She saw Maya's eyes open, and the cup slipped from her hand. Ice scattered across the floor. Camille didn't notice. She was across the room in 3 steps, her hands on Maya's face, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, her hair. Hi, Mom, Maya said. And the smallness of her voice, the way she said it like she was 5 years old again, shattered Camille completely. Hi, baby. Hi. I'm here. We're both here. You're safe now. Mom, can you look at my hands? Something's wrong with my right hand. Camille wiped her eyes. She gently took Maya's right hand and examined it with the careful precision of a surgeon. She asked Maya to try to move each finger individually. The thumb responded. The index finger responded with a delay. The middle finger barely twitched. The ring finger and pinky didn't move at all. Camille's face didn't change. She had spent 20 years controlling her expression in operating rooms while children's lives hung in the balance. But Derek saw the flicker in her eyes, the tiny contraction of muscle at the corner of her jaw, the sign that what she was seeing was bad. The swelling is compressing the nerve, Camille said calmly. Once the swelling goes down and we start therapy, we'll have a much better picture. This is day 2, Maya. Your body is still healing. But can I play? Camille looked at her daughter. You're going to play, Maya. I don't know when, but you will play. It was a promise that Camille wasn't sure she could keep, and Maya was old enough to hear the uncertainty underneath the words. But she nodded. She closed her eyes. Camille held one hand. Derek held the other. And for a few minutes, the Richardson family existed in a fragile bubble of relief that their daughter was alive and awake and speaking, even if the full damage was still unknown. That bubble lasted until 4:30 p.m. when David Mercer knocked on the door. Sorry to interrupt, David said. He was carrying his briefcase and his face had the particular intensity it always carried when he was in the middle of a case that was moving fast. Derek, I need 10 minutes. Derek kissed Maya's forehead and stepped into the hallway. David pulled him around the corner, away from the nurse's station. 3 things, David said. First, Gloria Henson's bail hearing happened 2 hours ago. The judge denied bail. She's being held at Rikers pending trial. The DA argued flight risk, and the judge agreed. Good. Second, Kyle Pruitt's cooperation agreement is signed. He's providing a full written statement and has agreed to testify at both the criminal trial and the civil proceeding. His statement is 47 pages. It details everything from the moment Gloria first approached Maya's seat to the moment you boarded the aircraft. And it includes something we didn't know. Derek's eyes narrowed. What? Kyle states that when he returned to the galley after leaving Maya alone, before he found her unconscious, he could hear her through the curtain. She was reciting something, over and over, counting backwards from 100. He says she got stuck at 83 and kept repeating it. 83, 83, 83. He stood on the other side of the curtain and listened for nearly 2 minutes before he went in. Derek's face didn't move, but his hand, resting against the wall, curled into a fist so tight his knuckles went white. He stood there, listening to her, and didn't go in. For approximately 2 minutes, yes, he states he was afraid of Gloria finding out he'd gone back to the galley without permission. He let my daughter suffocate because he was afraid of his supervisor. That's correct, and that's why his deal includes a guilty plea to reckless endangerment. He won't do prison time, but he'll have a felony on his record for life, and he's permanently barred from the aviation industry. Derek unclenched his fist. You said 3 things. What's the third? David opened his briefcase and pulled out a document. The discovery team pulled this from the Corbin servers this morning. It's not just the one memo, Derek. There are 14 internal communications over the past 3 years from Richard Calloway's office directing flight crews to implement what they called premium cabin integrity protocols. The language escalates over time. The first memos use words like verification and fraud prevention. By the most recent ones, the language is explicit. One email from Calloway to his VP of Operations says, and I quote, "Our Diamond Medallion members are paying for an experience. They don't want to sit next to someone who looks like they wandered in from the bus station. Use your judgment. Clear the cabin." Derek read the email. He read it twice. Someone who looks like they wandered in from the bus station. There are 11 formal complaints from passengers of color over the past 2 years alleging they were questioned, moved, or removed from first-class cabins on Pacific Alliance flights. None of those complaints were investigated. They were filed in a folder on Calloway's server labeled NFA, No Further Action. 11 families, Derek said quietly. 11 people this happened to before Maya. At minimum, those are just the ones who filed formal complaints. The actual number is likely much higher. Derek took the document. He folded it carefully and put it in his inside jacket pocket. File the class action. I was hoping you'd say that. I've already identified 6 of the 11 complainants. 4 have agreed to join as named plaintiffs. This isn't just about Maya anymore, Derek. This is about a pattern. It was always about a pattern, Derek said. Maya just happened to be the one who almost died from it. He walked back into the hospital room. Maya was asleep again, her face peaceful. Camille was sitting beside her, reading a medical journal, but her eyes weren't moving across the page. She was just sitting near her daughter, keeping watch. What did David want? Camille asked without looking up. There are more of them, Derek said. More families, more kids, more people they did this to. Camille closed the journal. How many? At least 11 that we know of. Camille looked at Maya. She looked at the bandages on her daughter's wrists. Then we fight for all of them. The weeks that followed moved at 2 speeds simultaneously. In the courts and the boardrooms, everything happened fast. In the hospital and the therapy rooms, everything happened with agonizing slowness. 3 weeks after the incident, Maya was discharged from Jamaica Hospital. The brain swelling had resolved. The lacerations on her wrists had closed, leaving raised scars that she touched constantly, running her left thumb over the ridges of damaged skin on her right wrist like she was reading Braille. The endotracheal intubation had left her voice slightly hoarse, a roughness around the edges that the ENT said might be permanent. But it was her right hand that consumed every waking hour. Dr. Anita Vasquez, the nerve specialist Camille had recruited from Johns Hopkins, delivered the full assessment on the day Maya was discharged. She sat across from Maya and her parents and spoke with the careful directness that Maya had come to expect from doctors who had bad news wrapped inside cautious optimism. The zip ties caused compression of the radial nerve and the ulnar nerve in your right wrist, Dr. Vasquez said. The radial nerve has partial damage. The ulnar nerve, which controls your ring finger and pinky, has more significant involvement. With intensive therapy, I expect you'll regain functional use of all 5 fingers. Functional, Maya repeated. What does functional mean? It means you'll be able to grip, write, type, and perform daily activities without significant limitation. Can I play piano? Dr. Vasquez paused. You'll be able to play piano. Can I play at the level I was playing before? The pause was longer this time. Maya, the honest answer is, I don't know yet. Concert-level piano requires extremely fine motor control, especially in the 4th and 5th digits. The nerve needs to regenerate, and nerve regeneration is unpredictable. Some patients recover full dexterity, some don't. Physical therapy will be the deciding factor. How long? 6 months minimum, possibly a year. Maya looked at her right hand. She tried to move her ring finger. It twitched. Barely. A millimeter of movement that 3 weeks ago would have been nothing, and now felt like a mountain she had to climb. Okay, Maya said. Then I start tomorrow. She started the next morning. Physical therapy 3 times a week at a specialized hand rehabilitation clinic in Manhattan. The therapist, a woman named Rosa, was gentle but relentless. She had Maya squeezing putty, stretching rubber bands, pressing individual keys on a practice keyboard, 1 finger at a time, hundreds of repetitions. The ring finger and pinky were the holdouts. They responded like they were underwater, slow and heavy and reluctant. Maya cried during the first session, not from pain, though there was pain. She cried because she pressed the C key with her ring finger, and instead of the clean, crisp strike she had been making since she was 4 years old, the finger buckled and slid off the key like it belonged to someone else. She didn't cry during the second session, or the third, or the 30th. She stopped crying and started working with a ferocity that Rosa said she had never seen in 20 years of practice. Maya came early. She stayed late. She did her exercises at home, at night, in the car, in waiting rooms. She carried a squeeze ball everywhere and worked it constantly, her right hand opening and closing, opening and closing, rebuilding the neural pathways one firing at a time. While Maya was fighting to get her hand back, the legal war was unfolding on multiple fronts. 8 weeks after the incident, the federal class action lawsuit was filed in the Southern District of New York, Richardson versus Pacific Alliance Airways. David Mercer stood on the courthouse steps with the 6 named plaintiffs behind him and announced that the suit alleged systemic racial discrimination in Pacific Alliance's first-class cabins spanning at least 3 years, affecting an estimated 200 or more passengers. The evidence was devastating. The 14 internal memos, the 11 buried complaints, Kyle Pruitt's testimony, Mr. Whitfield's video, which had now been viewed over 100 million times, and the most damaging piece of all, an email from Richard Calloway to his VP of Operations sent just 6 days before Maya's flight that read, "The London JFK route is our flagship. I want the first-class cabin to reflect our brand. You know what I mean. You know what I mean." 5 words that would be projected on courtroom screens and printed in newspapers and repeated on cable news for months. 5 words that stripped away every defense Pacific Alliance tried to build. 4 months after the incident, Gloria Henson's criminal trial began in Queens Supreme Court. It lasted 9 days. The prosecution called 14 witnesses. Maya testified on the 3rd day. She walked into the courtroom wearing a simple blue dress. The scars on her wrists were visible. Her right hand rested in her lap, and twice during her testimony she unconsciously flexed her ring finger, testing it, as if checking that it was still there. The prosecutor asked her to describe what happened in the galley. Maya spoke for 47 minutes. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She described everything with a clarity that silenced the courtroom. She described the sound of the zip ties clicking tight. She described the feeling of the plastic cutting into her skin. She described asking for water and being ignored. She described counting backwards from 100 the way her father had taught her and getting stuck at 83. "Why 83?" the prosecutor asked. "Because that's when I couldn't breathe anymore," Maya said. "I kept trying to say 82, but my lungs wouldn't let me. So I just said 83 over and over until everything went dark." The courtroom was silent. A juror in the back row wiped her eyes. Gloria Henson, sitting at the defense table in a jail-issued suit, stared at the table and didn't look up. The defense attorney tried. He argued that Gloria had followed her training. He argued that the airline's culture and the memo had created the conditions for this incident. He argued that Gloria was a scapegoat for a systemic problem. It was a reasonable argument, and it might have worked if not for one thing: the cockpit voice recorder audio. The prosecution played it on the 7th day of trial. The jury heard Gloria order Kyle to restrain Maya. They heard Maya begging for her inhaler. They heard Gloria say, "Save the drama." They heard 31 minutes of silence, broken only by Maya's fading voice repeating 83, 83, 83, until it stopped. They heard Kyle screaming that Maya wasn't breathing, and then they heard Gloria's voice, cold and sharp, saying 5 words that sealed her fate. "She's faking it. Keep her tied up." The jury deliberated for 3 hours and 14 minutes. They found Gloria Henson guilty on all counts: assault in the 2nd degree, unlawful imprisonment of a minor, child endangerment with depraved indifference. Sentencing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Gloria's lawyer requested leniency, citing her 22 years of service and clean record. The judge listened patiently and then delivered his ruling. "Ms. Henson," the judge said, "you were entrusted with the safety of every passenger on that aircraft. You held a position of authority and public trust, and you weaponized that authority against a child. Not because she posed a threat, not because she broke a rule, but because you looked at her and decided, based on her appearance, that she did not deserve to be where she was." Gloria stood with her hands clasped in front of her. She was thinner than she had been on the day of the flight. Rikers had taken the color from her face and the stiffness from her posture. You ignored her medical condition. You ignored her pleas. You ignored your own training. And when she lay unconscious in front of you, you told your colleague she was faking. You chose to protect yourself instead of protecting a child. For the charge of assault in the second degree, I sentence you to 5 years in state correctional facility. For unlawful imprisonment, 3 years to run concurrently. You are permanently barred from employment in the transportation sector." The gavel came down. Gloria's legs buckled. The bailiff caught her arm and steadied her. As they led her away in handcuffs, the same kind of restraints she had used on Maya, she turned and looked into the gallery. Derek was in the front row. Camille was beside him. Maya was not there. She had chosen not to attend the sentencing. She told her parents she didn't need to watch Gloria Henson's life end. She had her own life to rebuild. Derek met Gloria's eyes. He didn't smile. He didn't nod. He looked at her with the same expression he had worn on the tarmac the night he'd stormed the plane. Not rage, not triumph, just a profound, unflinching indifference. She was already irrelevant to him. The fight had moved past her. Richard Calloway's destruction took a different form. The federal investigation into Pacific Alliance's profiling practices expanded into an investigation of Calloway's personal finances. Discovery in the civil suit had turned up irregularities in the company's books. Funds earmarked for safety upgrades and crew training had been diverted into a network of shell companies that traced back to Calloway's personal accounts. The FBI got involved. The SEC got involved. The man who had been one of the most powerful executives in American aviation was now facing criminal charges that had nothing to do with Maya Richardson at all. He lost his Hamptons estate in a court-ordered asset seizure. His wife filed for divorce. His membership at 3 country clubs was revoked. His name became toxic on Wall Street. The last public sighting of Richard Calloway was a photograph taken by a tabloid photographer outside a bankruptcy court in Manhattan. He was wearing a suit that no longer fit because he had lost 20 pounds. He was arguing with his attorney on the courthouse steps. The headline read, "Fallen CEO's Empire Crumbles as Federal Charges Mount." Derek didn't follow Calloway's downfall. He didn't need to. The machinery of justice was grinding on its own now, and Derek had already shifted his attention to the thing that mattered more than any courtroom or boardroom. 5 months after the incident, Derek walked into the hand therapy clinic to pick up Maya from her session. Rosa met him in the hallway. She was smiling. Rosa rarely smiled during business hours. "What?" Derek said. "Go look." Derek walked to the therapy room door and looked through the window. Maya was sitting at the practice keyboard. She was playing scales. Both hands, all 10 fingers moving across the keys. The left hand was fluid, confident. The right hand was slower, and the ring finger still lagged a fraction behind the others. But it was moving. It was striking keys. It was making music. Maya looked up and saw her father through the window. She held up her right hand and wiggled her ring finger. It moved. Not perfectly, not fast, but it moved. Derek pressed his hand against the glass and felt something he hadn't felt since the night of the flight. Hope. Not the desperate, clinging hope of a man in a hospital hallway. Real hope. The kind that has evidence behind it. Maya walked out of the clinic and got in the car. She was quiet for a few blocks. Then she said, "I want to audition for Juilliard again." Derek glanced at her. "You already got in. They deferred your admission." "I know, but I want to audition again. New audition, new performance. I want to earn it with this hand, Dad, not the hand I had before. This one." Derek didn't argue. He didn't try to protect her from the possibility of failure. He looked at his daughter and saw something that Gloria Henson and Richard Calloway and the entire machinery of Pacific Alliance Airways had tried to crush and failed. He saw a girl who refused to be defined by the worst thing that had ever happened to her. "Okay," he said. "When?" "They have spring auditions in March. That gives me 4 more months." "Then you've got 4 months." Maya looked out the window. She was flexing her right hand, opening and closing it, working the ring finger against an invisible resistance. The scars on her wrist caught the late afternoon light and glinted silver. 4 months. She had 4 months to rebuild what they had broken. And she was going to do it 1 note at a time. The 4 months between Maya's decision to re-audition and the audition itself were the hardest months of her life. Harder than the hospital, harder than the trial. In the hospital, people took care of her. In the courtroom, lawyers fought for her. But in the practice room, it was just Maya and the piano and a right hand that refused to do what she told it to do. She practiced 6 hours a day. Rosa had told her 3 was enough. Camille had told her to listen to her body. Derek had told her that nobody would think less of her if she needed more time. Maya listened to all of them and ignored all of them. She sat at the Steinway in the music room of the Richardson estate every morning at 7, and she didn't get up until her hand cramped so badly that she physically couldn't press another key. The left hand was fine. The left hand played like it always had, fluid and confident, the fingers dancing across the keys with the kind of precision that had earned her a Juilliard scholarship at 16. But the right hand was a war. Every scale was a negotiation. Every chord was a battle. The thumb and index finger cooperated. The middle finger followed, reluctant but obedient. The ring finger was the enemy. It lagged. It buckled. It slipped off keys at critical moments. And the pinky, which had to anchor the hand during complex passages, trembled under pressure like a bridge with a cracked foundation. Maya tried to play Clair de Lune in the first week. She made it through 16 bars before the ring finger collapsed on a transition and the melody fell apart. She sat on the bench and stared at her hand and said nothing for a long time. Then she started the 16 bars again. By the second week, she could get through 32 bars. By the end of the first month, she could play the entire first movement, but it was rough, uneven, like a road with potholes. The technical precision that had defined her playing before the flight was gone. In its place was something raw and unpolished, a sound that was fighting for its own existence. Rosa noticed it during a therapy session in February, 2 months before the audition. Maya was doing her exercises, pressing keys on the practice keyboard with individual fingers, and Rosa stopped her. "Play something," Rosa said. "I'm doing my exercises." "I know. Play something anyway, something real." Maya hesitated. Then she played the opening of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. It was slow. The ring finger missed a grace note, and she compensated by shifting the weight to her middle finger, creating an accidental variation that shouldn't have worked, but somehow did. The passage had a catch in it, a tiny hesitation, where the nerve delay forced a pause that wasn't in the original score. It sounded like someone taking a breath before speaking. It sounded like grief. Rosa listened with her eyes closed. When Maya stopped, Rosa opened her eyes. "Maya, that was beautiful." It was wrong. The timing on the grace note was off by, I know what was off, and I'm telling you, it was beautiful. Not perfect, beautiful. There's a difference. Maya didn't understand what Rosa meant. Not yet. She would understand later, but in that moment, all she heard was not perfect, and for a girl who had built her identity on perfection, not perfect felt like failure. She doubled her practice hours, 7 hours a day, then 8. Camille found her at the piano at 11 o'clock on a Thursday night in late February, still playing, still drilling the same passage over and over, her right hand shaking with fatigue. "Maya, stop. I almost have it. You've been playing for 13 hours. Your hand is shaking. You're going to set yourself back." "I'm fine, Mom." "You're not fine. You're punishing yourself." Maya's fingers stopped on the keys. The silence that followed was heavy. "I'm not punishing myself." "Then what are you doing?" "I'm trying to be who I was before." Camille sat down on the bench beside her daughter. She took Maya's right hand gently and held it between both of hers. The scars on the wrist were silver white now, permanent, 2 thin lines that would never go away. "Baby, listen to me. You are not who you were before. You can't be. That girl walked onto a plane in London, and she didn't walk off it in New York. You are someone else now, and that's not a bad thing. It feels like a bad thing. I know, but the girl who walked onto that plane had never been tested. She had never been broken. She had never had to rebuild herself from the ground up. You have. And the music that comes out of these hands now, it has something in it that it didn't have before." "What?" survival. Maya looked at her mother. Camille's eyes were steady, the way they always were, but there was a brightness behind them that meant she was holding back tears. The audition panel at Juilliard doesn't want a machine, Maya. They want a musician. And a musician is someone who has lived. You have lived more in the last 9 months than most people live in 50 years. Let them hear that. Maya didn't practice 13 hours the next day. She practiced 4. And for the first time since the flight, she didn't drill individual passages or repeat scales or fight with her ring finger. She sat down at the piano and played. Just played. She played Clair de Lune from beginning to end, and she let the mistakes happen. She let the ring finger lag where it lagged. She let the pinky tremble where it trembled. She let the pauses fall where the nerve delay put them. And something shifted. The piece didn't sound broken anymore. It sounded honest. Derek heard it from the hallway. He had been walking past the music room on his way to his office, and the sound stopped him. He stood outside the door and listened to his daughter play. His eyes closed. The melody drifted through the house, carrying with it everything that had happened: the flight, the galley, the hospital, the courtroom, the months of therapy, the fury and the grief and the fear. But underneath all of it, rising like a pulse, was something that none of those things had been able to kill. Maya's spirit, her stubbornness, her refusal to let the worst thing that happened to her be the last thing that defined her. When the piece ended, Derek opened the door. Maya was sitting at the bench, her hands in her lap. She was crying, but she was smiling. "That was the one," Derek said softly. "That's your audition piece. It's not perfect. No, it's better." The audition was scheduled for March 14th. Derek wanted to drive her. Maya said no. She wanted to take the subway. Derek nearly had a heart attack at the suggestion, but Camille put a hand on his arm and shook her head, and Derek understood. This was Maya's fight. She needed to walk into that building on her own 2 feet, not delivered to the door by a billionaire's motorcade. Maya took the 1 train from the Upper West Side to Lincoln Center. She carried a leather portfolio with her sheet music, though she wouldn't need it. She had the piece memorized so deeply it lived in her bones. She wore a black dress and simple earrings. The scars on her wrists were visible. She hadn't tried to hide them. She arrived at the Juilliard building at 9:40 a.m. for a 10 a.m. audition slot. There were 6 other pianists in the waiting area. They were all nervous. They were all stretching their fingers and reviewing their scores and whispering to themselves. Maya sat quietly. She flexed her right hand. Open, close. Open, close. The ring finger moved. Slower than the others, but it moved. At 9:58, a woman with a clipboard called her name. "Maya Richardson? Here. You're next, Studio 4B. Maya stood up. Her legs were steady. Her heart was beating fast, but it was a clean, focused kind of fast, not the panicked hammering she'd felt on the plane. She walked down the hallway and through the door into Studio 4B. 3 people sat behind a long table. The head of the piano department, a woman named Dr. Elaine Foster, was in the center. A visiting professor from the Berlin Conservatory was on the left. A performance coach was on the right. They had Maya's file in front of them. They knew her story. Everyone in the classical music world knew her story. "Good morning, Maya," Dr. Foster said. Her voice was warm but professional. "Thank you for being here. Please take a seat at the piano whenever you're ready." Maya walked to the Steinway. She ran her hand along the edge of the fallboard. It was a Model D concert grand, the same model she had at home. She sat down. She adjusted the bench. She placed her hands on her thighs and took 3 slow breaths. "I'll be playing Clair de Lune by Debussy," Maya said, "whenever you're ready." Maya placed her hands on the keys. Her left hand was steady. Her right hand had the faintest tremor, visible only if you were looking for it. She closed her eyes. She thought about the galley. She thought about the zip ties. She thought about Gloria Henson's voice saying, "Save the drama." She thought about the number 83. She thought about waking up in the hospital and not being able to move her fingers. She thought about Rosa saying, "Not perfect, beautiful." She thought about her mother saying, "Survival." She thought about her father kissing the scar on her wrist. She pressed the first key. The note rang out pure and clear in the studio. D flat, the opening of Clair de Lune. Then the second note, then the third. The left hand carried the bass line with liquid confidence. The right hand entered softly, gently, picking up the melody like a hand reaching for something precious. The first passage was flawless. The second passage had the lag. The ring finger on the arpeggiated chord came in a fraction late, creating that tiny pause, that breath that Rosa had heard in the therapy room. Maya didn't fight it. She let it live. She let the delay become part of the phrase, a hesitation that sounded like remembering, like someone reaching back into a painful memory and touching it gently before moving on. The piece built. The middle section demanded speed and dexterity, and this was where Maya's right hand was most vulnerable. The ring finger and pinky had to carry rapid 16th note passages that required the kind of fine motor control that her damaged nerve couldn't fully deliver. Maya knew this. She had known it for months. She couldn't play these passages the way she had played them before the flight, so she played them differently. She shifted the voicing. She redistributed the weight across her fingers, letting the stronger digits carry the technical load, while the weaker ones handled the softer, more lyrical elements. It wasn't the standard interpretation. Any piano teacher would have marked it as a modification, but it worked. It more than worked. It created a sound that was uniquely Maya's, an interpretation that only someone who had been forced to reimagine their own body could have created. The final movement arrived, the crescendo, the moment where the piece opens up like a flower and every note is supposed to ring with clarity and power. Maya's hand spread wide across the keys. Her left hand thundered through the bass. Her right hand reached for the high notes. The ring finger struck the E flat. It hit clean, strong, full. Maya's eyes flew open. She looked at her right hand. The ring finger was on the key. It had struck the note perfectly, not a millisecond late, not weak, not buckled. Perfect. She finished the piece. The last notes faded into the silence of Studio 4B. Maya lifted her hands from the keys and placed them in her lap. She was breathing hard. Her eyes were wet, but her back was straight and her chin was up. Dr. Foster was staring at her. The visiting professor had taken off his glasses and was pressing his fingers to the bridge of his nose. The performance coach was writing furiously on her notepad. "Maya," Dr. Foster said. She paused. She cleared her throat. "Thank you. That was extraordinary." "Thank you," Maya said. "The panel will deliberate and you'll receive our decision by mail within 2 weeks." Maya stood up. She pushed in the bench. She walked to the door. She stopped. "Dr. Foster." "Yes?" "I just want you to know that 9 months ago, I couldn't move 2 of my fingers. The doctor said I might never play at this level again, but I'm here. And whatever you decide, I want you to know that walking into this room and sitting at that piano is the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than the flight, harder than the hospital. Because on the plane, they took my choice away. Today, I chose to be here, and that matters more to me than any decision you make." "Doctor." Foster nodded slowly. "It matters to us too, Maya." Maya walked out. She rode the elevator down. She walked through the lobby and out onto Broadway, where the March wind hit her face. She pulled out her phone and called her father. "How'd it go?" Derek asked. He answered before the first ring finished. "I played the whole thing, Dad. Every note." "How was the ring finger?" "It hit the E flat. Clean." Derek was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick. "I'm proud of you, Maya. I've never been more proud of anything in my life." "Don't make me cry on Broadway, Dad." "Too late. I'm already crying in my office." The letter arrived 8 days later. Camille brought it in from the mailbox and set it on the kitchen counter. It sat there for 2 hours because Maya couldn't bring herself to open it. She circled the kitchen. She made tea she didn't drink. She picked up the envelope and put it down 4 times. Finally, Derek walked in. He saw the envelope. He saw his daughter staring at it. He pulled out a chair and sat down. "Want me to open it?" "No." "Want your mom to open it?" "No." "Want to let it sit there until it opens itself?" Maya laughed. It was a nervous, shaky laugh, but it was real. She picked up the envelope and tore it open. She read the first line. She read it again. She looked at her father. "Full scholarship," she whispered. "They gave me a full scholarship." Derek stood up so fast his chair fell over. Maya crashed into him, and he caught her, lifting her off the ground the way he used to when she was little, spinning her around in the kitchen. Camille heard the noise from upstairs and came running down. She saw her husband and daughter laughing and crying at the same time, and she didn't need to ask. She threw her arms around both of them. The three of them stood in the kitchen, tangled together, holding on. 9 months ago, a woman on an airplane had decided that Maya Richardson didn't belong. Today, one of the most prestigious music institutions in the world had decided she did. That evening, Derek asked Maya to come to his study. He had something to show her. She sat in the leather chair across from his desk, the same chair she'd sat in 1,000 times as a kid, doing homework while her father built his empire. "I have a birthday present for you," Derek said. "I know your birthday was 7 months ago, but this one took a while to put together. You already bought me a car, Dad. This is bigger than a car." He turned his laptop screen to face her. On the screen was a website. The logo at the top read Richardson Air in clean, modern typography. Below it was a tagline, "Everyone belongs." Maya stared at the screen. "What is this?" "Pacific Alliance Airways ceased to exist as of last Friday," Derek said. "The board voted to accept my acquisition offer. I bought the airline, every plane, every route, every gate. We're relaunching it as Richardson Air in 60 days. "You bought an airline." "I bought the airline, the one that did this to you, and we're rebuilding it from the ground up. New leadership, new crew training, new policies. Every single employee goes through a program we designed with the NAACP and the Equal Justice Initiative. Mandatory de-escalation training, mandatory bias awareness. A passenger advocate on every international flight whose only job is to make sure no crew member ever does what Gloria Henson did." Maya looked at the logo. She looked at the tagline, "Everyone belongs." She touched the screen with her right hand, the ring finger pressed flat against the glass. "There's one more thing," Derek said. "I named the first aircraft in the new fleet." "What did you name it?" Derek smiled. "The Maya." Maya's eyes filled up. She tried to speak and couldn't. She stood up and walked around the desk and hugged her father, pressing her face into his shoulder the way she used to when she was small, and Derek held her and let her cry. "I'm scared to fly, Dad," she whispered. "I'm still scared." "I know, baby, but I want to try." "Then we'll fly together. First flight, you and me, seat 1A and 1B. "Which route?" "London to JFK, same route. We're taking it back, Maya." She pulled away and wiped her eyes. She held up her right hand. She spread her fingers wide. All 5 extended, all 5 moved. The ring finger was a fraction slower, a fraction stiffer, and it always would be. But it was there. It worked. It played music. It was hers. "Okay," Maya said, "let's fly." 3 weeks later, the inaugural flight of Richardson Air departed London Heathrow at 8 p.m., bound for JFK. Maya sat in seat 1A, Derek sat in 1B. Camille was across the aisle in 2A. David Mercer was in 2B, already reviewing documents on his laptop. Mr. Whitfield, who had been invited personally by Derek, sat in 3A with a glass of champagne and no intention of recording anything. The flight attendant who greeted Maya at the cabin door was a young woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. She looked at Maya's boarding pass. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Richardson. Is there anything I can get you before takeoff? Water? A blanket? We have noise-canceling headphones if you'd like." Maya looked at the flight attendant's name tag. "Thank you, Angela. I'm okay for now." The plane pushed back from the gate. Maya gripped the armrest. Her heart rate climbed. Derek reached over and took her left hand. He didn't say anything. He just held it. The way he'd held it when she was 9. The way he'd held it in the hospital. The way he would hold it for the rest of his life if she needed him to. The engines roared. The aircraft accelerated down the runway. Maya closed her eyes. She felt the wheels lift off the ground. She felt the push of gravity as the plane climbed. Her throat tightened. The galley flashed behind her eyelids. The zip ties. The darkness. 83. Then she felt her father's hand squeeze hers. Once, twice, 3 times. Their old signal. I love you. Maya squeezed back 3 times. She opened her eyes. The plane was above the clouds. The sun was setting over the Atlantic, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange. Maya pulled out her iPad and opened the drawing app. The birthday portrait was still there, the one she'd been working on the night everything went wrong. The man in the birthday hat, the looping script, "Happy 50th, Dad. Thanks for being my wings." She looked at it for a long time. Then she opened a new canvas and started a new drawing. A piano, a pair of hands on the keys, and on the left wrist, 2 thin silver lines that caught the light. She titled it 82 because she had finally gotten past 83. 30,000 feet above the ocean, Maya Richardson was flying again. Not because the fear was gone, because she was bigger than the fear. They had chained her down at 17, and she had risen at 18, with scars on her wrists and music in her hands and a name that the whole world now knew. Gloria Henson was serving 5 years in a cell upstate. Richard Calloway was bankrupt and facing federal charges. The airline that had tortured a child was gone, replaced by one that carried a girl's name on its first aircraft. And the man in 1B wasn't complaining about his scotch. He was raising a glass to the girl in 1A, the girl who had been told she didn't belong and had come back to own the sky. They tried to break her at 30,000 feet. They failed, because Maya Richardson was never just a girl in a hoodie. She was a force, and forces don't break. They transform. They rise. And once they rise, they never come back down.